So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Lives of the Saints, episode 15. We're doing Jeremy's Faith.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I had it open on another tab. There we go. Sorry.
Are you good?
Yep. Sorry. You started talking to me again. I was like, uh-oh. Sorry.
So, we're going to cover St. Gabriel, the Fool for Christ. And St. Gabriel is a little bit of a modern saint too, right?
Yeah. He just reposed in the 90s. So very, very recent. And he was only canonized this year. So
oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
interesting. So we'll cover.
So I'm really excited. I heard his story several years ago, and he's been very special to me ever since I heard the story. The first story I ever heard from him or of him was when he burned down a big banner of Lenin in Georgia. He's from Georgia, the country, and they were having a big rally, and it's in his life that we'll share. But anyway, he burned down that banner and was tortured for like a year afterward. But he wanted to show the people that they were involved in things that were not pleasing to God, and it made him very upset. So we'll hear more about it tonight. But with that, like when I saw the icon of him, I'll pull it up too. Let's see. Of him burning the
flag,
the banner. Yeah, I was like, that's my guy right there.
Did you happen to get to Paul Kingsnorth's talk by any chance?
I listened to the first half of it. I didn't hear the rest. But it was what I heard was very good, but I didn't hear the whole. Okay, I'm just pulling this up. That's it.
Do you want to wait a few minutes and let people arrive?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, anyway, so this is the first icon of St. Gabriel I ever saw, and it was in a church in Georgia. And
you were in Georgia?
No, I just saw a picture of it.
Oh, okay.
I wish. I would love to travel to Georgia, but I've never been there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was like, okay, I got to know this guy. So, and the more I've gotten to know him, the more fond of him I've grown. The more inspired I've been, and there's some really moving stories from his life. So I'm really looking forward. I've been looking forward to
it too.
Yeah.
I haven't peeked. I didn't even watch the video you sent because I always like to be surprised on the evening of.
Oh, fun. Okay, great.
Yeah. But I will watch that video. You know, that video has been popping up in my algorithm for months.
The Life of St. Gabriel?
Yeah, that same one.
Yeah. Well, it's really well done. It's like an hour-long documentary, and they tell his life. They tell stories from his life that are illustrated, and then they interview people who knew him. They actually went to Georgia, and you hear stories of people who knew him.
Oh, I'm gonna love it.
Yeah, it's really great, really great. So.
Yeah. So I think this is our first Fool for Christ, right?
No, we did Saint Simeon, the Fool for Christ. We didn't do Saint Andrew, the Fool for Christ, but we did do Saint Simeon, the Fool for Christ. I think that's the only other one, though. That's the only one I can remember. I don't have our little episode guide up in front of me.
Yeah, it's okay.
Did you look at it? I made it. I worked hard on it.
I did look at it. I actually did look at it, and I'm glad you have it. Yeah, but now I'm actually titling each episode with the saint because, well, you're telling me ahead of time for one thing, and then it'll be easier to remember.
Yes, and find them later.
Yeah.
Let's be good.
Exactly. So, we should also do at some point some of the stylite saints. That's always really fascinating.
Oh yeah, I have a whole book on them.
Do you?
Yeah, I have a whole book on stylized saints. So I'm I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That was one of the most intriguing things I ever heard of when I first started inquiring into Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Was these men living on pillars. I'm like, wait a minute. What is happening?
Right. Yeah.
But
Well, and the very first one who did it, they were like, oh, maybe this guy is just prideful. And so his bishop went to the pillar where he was living and told him to come down. And he immediately just stood up and started climbing down the ladder. And the bishop was like, no, stay. It was like a test, you know?
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
he immediately was obedient to the bishops. But yeah, no, it's very, yeah, there's more than one. I think Saint Daniel the Stylite was the first one. And then there were many others after that.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I can't remember.
Was there a Simeon too? A Simeon?
Yes, there was Saint Simeon. Yeah.
The Stylite.
Stylite, yeah. And then there was a Saint Daniel. And maybe you're right as far as Saint Simeon being first. I can't remember.
I think it's a long time ago now that I looked into it, but I think Saint Simeon was his father also a Stylite saint? Or something like that. I have to look it up now. The Stylite. He lived on the
first known Stylite was Simeon Stylites the Elder, who climbed a pillar in Syria in 423.
I mean, and then there's the younger.
Yep. And then there's and then there were several around that time. And then
maybe there were
Saint Daniel the Stylite was one of the first people who've like followed Saint Simeon's example.
Right.
So I was confused on who was first there. And then there's one in the Georgian. There's one in Georgia. There's several.
Yeah. Interesting.
Oh wow, I have to share this picture. This was a drawing it was an illustration of a poem from Alfred Lord Tennyson called Saint Simeon Stylites, which I'll have to read that now. But let me share this. Yeah, let me show you this illustration. It's really great.
Maybe we'll do him next week.
Okay, that'd be great. We could do Simeon and Daniel.
Okay.
Here comes the illustration.
Oh wow. Saint Simeon Stylites. Yeah.
I'll have to look up that poem.
Wow.
That's quite
amazing. That's an
quite
amazing
an illustration.
Is that like a dragon under there? There's a dragon.
Yes. Yeah, look at the foot. Oh, we can make it bigger. There we go. Yeah, look at there we go. There's a tail and feet. Oh yeah, and it's coming up over. And then there's birds bringing him
bread,
bringing him food. Oh, this is great.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. All
right. Yeah, there's a preview for next week. So,
all right.
There you go. That'll be great.
Okay. Well, let's get started, Jeremy.
Okay. Sounds great. Welcome, Jasberg.
Yeah.
I will share this. You can. I think some people like reading along.
I do. So, yeah, it's great.
Actually. Okay. All right, great. Well, let me get my glasses. This is Saint Gabriel, confessor and fool for Christ. Archimandrite. Oh, and again, at the beginning, I always need to apologize for my pronunciation of names. I'll do my best, and I pray for Saint Gabriel to help me share his life in a way pleasing to him. Archimandrite Gabriel, born Godurzi Urgbadze, is one of the most renowned Orthodox monks in Georgia. He was born to Vasily and Barbara Ergabadze on 26 August 1929 in Tbilisi, Georgia. He was baptized as an infant in St. Martyr Barbara's Church in the Naflugi district by the former Sister of Mercy, Tamar Begashvili. The communist regime was fiercely violent during that time. Religion was persecuted, churches were destroyed and closed, and innocent people were murdered and deported. Gadursty was about 2 years old when his father, Vasil Ergabadze, was murdered under uncertain circumstances. After that, his family members called him Vasiko in honor of his father. Vasiko was an ordinary boy. Vasiko was an extraordinary boy. From his childhood, he had been endowed with divine grace. He used to build small churches from pebbles and light matches inside them. Barbara, his mother, after the repose of Father Gabriel, his mother entered the Sumtavro convent as Nun Anna. She is buried next to her son, was afraid that someone might see her son's actions, as it was not unlikely that someone could have spied on their family due to their defiance of communist ideology. In his youth, Vasiko behaved strangely. He often stopped playing with his friends and preferred to be alone in silence. However, he still engaged in an unusual activity. He would take a small stick in his hands and run off. Chirping birds would perch on it and follow him along the way, which surprised everyone. Vasiko was a gentle-hearted child. He did not allow traps to be set for mice. He caught them in a cage and later released them outside the yard. He started school at the age of 6. Learning to read, write, and do arithmetic came easy to him, and he gained much admiration for his kindness. At the age of 7, he first heard the name of God, which had a profound impact on his mind and completely transformed his ordinary life. He soon gathered enough money to buy a gospel, marking the beginning of his entirely new life. From that day until his death, Monk Gabriel was filled with a singular thought and devotion to live only for Christ. He spent all his time reading his gospel and showed no interest in anything else. He allocated minimal time to lessons to have more time for his gospel. After going to bed, he would enter his room and pray for an extended period in front of the icons. A few days before his death, Monk Gabriel recalled that period of his childhood. I was sitting on the balcony of the second floor, lost in thought, when an inner voice dictated to me to look up at the sky. I stood up, approached the edge of the balcony, gazed upwards, and saw a large cross erected in the sky. At that time, I didn't know, but now I understand that it was the cross I had to bear out of love for God and my people. Another memory from the same period of his childhood is as follows. While I was asleep at night, I suddenly awoke and saw a demon with a terrifying face in front of me. He was staring at me with rage. By God's mercy, I wasn't frightened, but I became tense. However, I didn't take any action to drive him away. I simply looked at him in astonishment. He roared at me, "You're fighting against me, are you?" And he struck me with his fist. When Barbara entered the room, she found her son unconscious. Yet God had saved the life of his chosen one. Little Vasiko still derives some benefit from that incident, as Monk Gabriel attests in one of his recollections. Upon witnessing the demon, my faith in Christ grew stronger, and I declared, even if the demon exists, then God exists in even greater measure. Moreover, I came to appreciate the beauty of human beings. At the age of 12, God bestowed upon Vasiko divine power and revelations due to his genuine love and unwavering devotion. Nun Pelagia, the former egumenia of the Gurjani nunnery of St. Virgin Mary, was of the same age as Monk Gabriel, and his neighbor recalls, "One summer day, my uncle came home and proclaimed loudly for all to hear, 'Glory to Christ our Lord, it seems he preserves his chosen ones on the earth.' When asked, 'What happened? What has surprised you?' he responded by recounting the following remarkable tale. I was walking home along the old St. Barbara Road. As I approached the ruined church of St. George, I noted, I noticed Godursty, Veziko's son, diligently clearing the church of large boulders under the scorching sun. Engrossed in his work, he didn't notice me for a while. Witnessing this, I remained silent, but when he finally saw me, he greeted me warmly and said, "Come, Uncle Muka, and if you can, help me with this." He gestured toward a sizable boulder. My uncle, known as Muka, meaning oak, due to his strength and wrestling prowess, was actually named George. Muka continued, I exerted all my strength, yet I couldn't budge the boulder. Then Vasiko uttered, "In the name of Christ," lifted the boulder, and added it to the other rocks he had gathered from the church. Our family held religious beliefs, but due to the atheist regime, we refrained from attending church services and fasting. However, from that very day, my uncle embarked on a Christian life. During World War II, impoverished individuals who had no access to frontline information often sought out Vasiko to obtain news about their relatives. Despite being only 12 years old at the time, Father Gabriel responded to all visitors and preached, advising, "Turn to the church, remain steadfast in your faith in Christ, and safeguard the salvation of your souls." His prophetic words consistently proved true, and he earned great respect from the people. Vasiko's remarkable abilities and apparent clairvoyance worked to restore people's trust in the church. However, young Vasiko didn't accept praise and honor from others, displaying an unusual humility. He would place himself amidst garbage and proclaim loudly, "Always remember, Vasiko, that you are nothing but refuse, and never hold yourself in high regard." His family members were displeased with such behavior and often and even disciplined him, but people refrained from mocking him or insulting him. It is worth mentioning another remarkable event in the early life of Monk Gabriel. During the Soviet purges and persecutions, people concealed icons in attics or other hidden places. As many individuals wavered in their faith and failed to show proper respect to these sacred objects, young Vasiko took it upon himself to address them. He would approach such people and say, "You have an icon in your house," pointing precisely to its location. "You should either treat it with due reverence or give it to me. I will safeguard it. If you ever wish to reclaim it, come to me and I will gladly return it." Some heeded his words and kept their icons, while others, lacking such intention, surrendered their icons to him. Everyone was astounded by the behavior of the young boy. Vasiko cherished these icons with a special love. He meticulously and attentively adorned the icons in his church and in the cell at the Samtavro convent. These beautifully adorned icons now grace nearly all the walls and the ceiling, leaving an indelible impression on pilgrims and visitors. However, Vasiko's tranquil life was short-lived. His mother, Barbara, was an honest and hard-working woman. She possessed youthful beauty and married early at the age of 14. From her first marriage, she bore 3 children, Emma, Michael, and Godursty Vasiko. Following a family tragedy involving her husband's death, the 22-year-old woman found herself in a helpless situation. Without anyone to rely on, she toiled tirelessly to support her family. Her second marriage brought forth a daughter, Julieta. Monk Gabriel encountered his first significant challenge at the age of 12. While his mother was not devoid of religious inclination, she did not approve of her son leading a religious life. Initially surprised by her son's fervent devotion to Christianity, she soon witnessed his faith taking root and growing steadfast. She fervently urged her son to abandon his chosen path. "Don't torment yourself. Live as ordinary people do. Be religious, but do not let your desires be solely fixed on the gospel and religion." Many years later, when Monk Gabriel lay seriously ill and passed away a year later, his mother and sisters visited him. Tearful and distraught, Barbara implored her son, "What kind of life did you lead, Gabriel? Full of suffering and nothing else. You never had a proper childhood. It would have been wiser to heed my advice and take better care of yourself. You were a man, weren't you?" Seeing his mother weeping with tears in her eyes, Gabriel felt a sense of remorse, not for himself, but for his mother, who still couldn't comprehend his inner calling. She had been a witness to her son's hardships, and her tears were born from deep pain. After a brief silence, Father Gabriel responded in a gentle, soft voice, "I couldn't have led a different life." His resolve hadn't wavered since the age of 12. Upon facing another refusal from her son, Barbara, in anger, cast the gospel into the toilet. Vasico promptly retrieved it, held it to his chest, and cried out plaintively. This marked the final moment when Vasico was compelled to make a life-defining decision. At midnight, Vasico took his gospel and left his home. The late autumn air chilled him as he walked day and night, eventually reaching the city of Mksheta. His first stop was the Somtavro convent, where Egumenia Anusia welcomed him with warmth, providing shelter and sustenance. However, she couldn't allow him to stay, as men were not permitted in the nunnery. She suggested he proceed to the Svetitskoveli monastery, the Living Pillar. With heartfelt prayers before the Ivoron icon of the Mother of God of Somtavro, Vasico sought a cell and the right to live in the monastery. After spending 3 days at the Living Pillar Monastery, a governmental decree mandated that underage individuals could not be lodged there for extended periods. Vasico then journeyed to the Shio Migivni, monastery, where he found refuge for 3 days before being directed to the Zedazeni monastery. Here, several elderly monks resided, and they cherished the young believer, providing him shelter near the monastery for several weeks. Due to heightened scrutiny from law enforcement, these monks arranged for Gabriel's transfer to the Bethany monastery. Provided with detailed directions and some food, Gabriel reached the Bethany monastery, where he was welcomed by 2 resident monks, Father George, later canonized as St. George, John McGedsdy, and Father John, later canonized as St. John. These monks became Gabriel's most cherished confessors. After his time at Bethany, little is known about his subsequent movements and whereabouts. For a period, Vasico found refuge with a kind woman named Margot, who resided in Tbilisi and earned her livelihood through fortune-telling. Vasico was saddened by the fact that such a benevolent woman was leading a misguided life and indulging in sinful activities. One day, Margot fell ill, and Vasico comforted her, pledging that he would attend to the people who came seeking her services. True to his word, the pious child greeted those who came to the fortune-teller's abode, preaching love for God and emphasizing the importance of leading a Christian life. Endowed with the gift of prophecy, Vasico engaged in discussions with visitors about potential future dangers and past sins they had forgotten. He encouraged them to confess their sins to a priest and partake in Holy Communion. People were astounded by his conduct. Margot, moved by Vasico's influence, believed in him and discontinued her fortune-telling activities, embracing a Christian way of life. This transformation stirred considerable rumors in Tbilisi during those years. Meanwhile, Vasico's mother persisted in searching for her son and eventually located him. Tearfully, she implored him, "Please come back home and live as you wish. I won't hinder your chosen path." Her heart was filled with joy upon reuniting with him. Vasico heeded his mother's plea and returned home. From that point onward, Barbara's demeanor towards her son became less strict. Nevertheless, she repeatedly advised him to lead an ordinary existence and not to focus solely on his faith. Around once a month, Vasico would make the journey to Bethany and offer assistance to the elderly monks, engaging in various tasks around the monastery. At the age of 16, he embarked on a pilgrimage to the Martkopi monastery. During his journey, he encountered a revered monk named Father Etala, whom Father Gabriel held in high esteem and would later recall with profound respect and affection. describing him as a great monk gifted with clairvoyance. Another noteworthy incident from Father Gabriel's life during the same period deserves mention. At one point, the communist government decided to renovate a public park near the old Vera Cemetery, where the remains of Georgian young soldiers who had died in the war for Georgia's independence in 1921 were interred. The area underwent cleaning using bulldozers, a harsh action that deeply affected Vesico. He took this event to heart, collecting the scattered bones in sacks during the nights and secretly reburying them in a more secure and respectful location. In 1949, Vesico was conscripted into the Soviet Army for military service. He was stationed in the Batumi Border Guard unit. Despite the strict military regimen, he managed to observe fasting and even secretly made his way to St. Nicholas Church to partake in the Holy Sacraments. Upon completing his mandatory military service, Vesico returned home. However, his life took a challenging turn. He was summoned to a medical hospital where he was interrogated about the visions he had experienced during his childhood, particularly the encounter with the evil spirit at the age of 12. After a few days, he was issued a certificate declaring him mentally ill, and he was prohibited from holding any employment. He was granted a disability pension of the 2 category, a grave violation of legal norms. Soviet authorities took these actions to ensure that an individual with his strong beliefs did not pose a threat to the communist system. Despite these circumstances, Vesico's devotion to his spiritual life only grew stronger. In his backyard, he constructed a small dwelling where he lived and carried out his spiritual practices in tranquility. He continued to visit the Sioni Cathedral for prayers and sermons. Not long after his beatitude, the Catholicos Patriarch of all Georgia, Melchizedek III, took notice of the young believer. With the blessing of Melchizedek III, Vesico began working as a watchman in the Sioni Cathedral and later served as a reader. In January 1955, he was consecrated as a deacon, and on February 23rd, he took his monastic vows at the Matsameta Monastery in Kutaisi, adopting the name Gabriel. Just 3 days later, he was ordained as a hieromonk by Bishop Gabriel of the Kutaisi Genati Eparchy at the St. Peter and St. Paul Cathedral. So a hieromonk is a priest monk. From the moment he took his monastic vows, Monk Gabriel devoted himself tirelessly and with boundless love to God and his fellow beings. With the approval of Melchizedek III, he initially served at the Sioni Cathedral, and from 1960 onwards, he dedicated himself to the Bethany Monastery, alongside his cherished spiritual companions, Father George and priest monk Vasily. In 1962, following the passing of Father John, Father George, and priest monk Vasily, the government ordered the closure of the Bethany Monastery. Monk Gabriel returned to Tbilisi and with his own hands constructed a 7-cupola church in his backyard. From 1962 to 1965, Monk Gabriel served the Trinity Cathedral of All Saints and attracted a small parish community. It is quite difficult for the contemporary generation to imagine an unusual spiritual ability of a young monk who adopted unprecedented and astonishing step. During the oppressive communist regime, Monk Gabriel demonstrated an extraordinary and unprecedented spiritual courage. In the midst of the May Day demonstration in 1965, he took a remarkable step by publicly burning an enormous portrait of Lenin in front of the Council of Ministers. Fearlessly, he proclaimed to the shocked onlookers, "No glory should be given to this deceased man, but glory to Christ who conquered death and bestowed upon us eternal life." An enraged crowd pelted him with stones mercilessly. The city declared a level 1 alarm, the highest in the Soviet Union, and only the intervention of the infamous 8th Regiment saved Monk Gabriel from death. Though severely injured with 17 fractures to his skull and other parts of his body, Monk Gabriel was taken to the isolation unit of the Security Department Hospital. He was sentenced to death, and the subsequent investigation was conducted as a mere formality. However, the communist authorities exhibited a particular interest in Monk Gabriel's case. They demanded that he confess to an alleged conspiracy within the Georgian Orthodox Church, offering to spare his life in return. Despite enduring prolonged torture, Monk Gabriel remained steadfast. In fact, during his interrogations, he reiterated his characterization of Lenin as a beast, resulting in further brutal beatings. This astonishing and sensational news spread across European and U.S. media, influencing Kremlin policy. Instead of execution, Monk Gabriel was declared mentally ill and sent to a psychiatric hospital. The Soviet government intended to confine him there indefinitely. However, God has preserved the life of his chosen one, not for such fate. It is interesting to read an excerpt from the medical conclusion. Georgian Tbilisi Healthcare City Psychoneurological Hospital in 1966. Patient Vasily Urgbadze, born in 1929. The patient was admitted to the City Psychoneurological Hospital on August 18, 1965, brought from prison for compulsory treatment. Diagnosis: psychopathic individual, prone to schizophrenia-like blank episodes. He was discharged from the hospital on November 19, 1965. According to his medical history, he experienced visions of a ghostly evil spirit with horns on its head at the age of 12. The patient contends that all the evils in the world are the result of malevolent forces. He began attending churches, engaging in prayer, acquiring icons, and studying church literature from the age of 12. He observed fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays. Adults and soldiers ridiculed his beliefs. On Wednesday, Judas sold Christ for 30 pieces of silver, and on Friday, Jewish priests crucified him. His thoughts appeared to be entirely hallucinatory. It became evident from the case that on May 1st, 1965, during a demonstration, he set fire to a large portrait of Lenin hanging on the Council of Ministers building. After an interrogation, he explained that he did this because he believed a depiction of the crucifixion of Christ should adorn that spot, rather than idolizing a mere mortal man. This raised doubts about his mental well-being, leading to his referral for a court-ordered psychopathic evaluation. The assessment revealed that the patient's orientation was disoriented with respect to time, place, and environment. He engaged in whispered self-talk, expressing belief in the existence of heavenly beings, God, angels, etc. Throughout conversation, his focus consistently centered on the concept that everything was subject to God's will, etc. He was isolated from other patients in the ward. When engaged in conversation, he surely mentioned God, angels, and icons. He displayed an inability to critically assess his condition. He received treatment involving aminazine phrasia and symptonicine therapy, following which he underwent a medical review. He was discharged from the hospital on 19th of January 1965 and was taken home by his mother. The unfavorable assessment provided by the Soviet doctors serves as proof of Father Gabriel's profound love for God. It's remarkable that the Soviet officials used Father Gabriel's description of his virtuous life as a medical basis for his release from the mental hospital. This turn of events, brought about by what appears to be the intervention of God's will, showcases the incredible things that can occur when divine forces intercede in human affairs. Father Gabriel's release came about within 7 months of his imprisonment, largely thanks to the efforts of the renowned Georgian academician A. Zubrabashvili. After 3 decades during his service at the Samtavro convent, Father Gabriel received a visit from Hieromonk Gerasim, a member of the Brotherhood of America's largest Orthodox monastery, St. Herman of Alaska. Subsequently, Hieromonk Gerasim published the book Christ's Confessor in the Present-Day Georgia in the USA, concluding it with the words, "Father Gabriel blessed us and we departed, having witnessed the triumph of the New Testament church in our own day. Despite the fact that Father Gabriel's priesthood remained intact, he was suspended from performing priestly duties. As a result, he attended church sermons alongside the parishioners and received Holy Communion as a layperson. He frequently had to appear at the security department, often returning home after being mercilessly beaten. There was an incident where the beatings were particularly severe, rendering him unable to walk independently. In this case, Soviet security officers contacted his family members to inform them of his location after leaving him in a compromised state. After that point, Father Gabriel made a resolute decision to undergo a complete transformation in his lifestyle, even though it was an incredibly challenging path for him. He chose to adopt a new approach, pretending to be mentally ill and outwardly rejecting his accustomed way of life. In contrast to his former silent demeanor, he now vocally preached in the streets. Whereas he had previously abstained from wine, he began to drink in the presence of others, feigning drunkenness. This decision to simulate foolishness was a remarkable feat that demanded both spiritual strength and a divine intellect. It brings to mind the biblical verse from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 25, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Monk Gabriel's exceptional modesty was truly remarkable. His elder sister, Mrs. Emma, reminisced about him with great admiration. We couldn't fully comprehend him. His soul was refined even from his childhood. After he was consecrated as a priest, he gained much respect from people. Whenever Monk Gabriel came home, he would enter his church and often weep plaintively. On one occasion, I heard him crying through the open door of his church, and I grew concerned. I entered the church and asked him, "Vasiko, my brother, why are you crying? Is something troubling you?" He replied, "Sister, Christ was born in a manger, yet people show me respect and kiss my hand." These words encapsulate Monk Gabriel's profound humility and his unwavering commitment to living a life of selflessness and service, mirroring the humility of Christ. Despite Father Gabriel's exceptional modesty, both secular and religious figures held him in profound respect and reverence, drawn by his extraordinary qualities of love, kindness, wisdom, prophetic insights, knowledge of hidden thoughts, and mastery over time, space, and matter. 4 years had passed since Monk Gabriel's release from prison and the asylum. The communist authorities found his courageous activities and his religious devotion intolerable. They made the decision to demolish his church, a reflection of the inner conflict between the regime's oppressive agenda and Father Gabriel's unyielding spirit. However, Monk Gabriel rebuilt his church on 3 separate occasions. Eventually, the head of the Soviet police department and later the secretary of the district party committee secretly approached him to offer personal pardons. Father Gabriel reconstructed the church and chapel within a short span of time, though not in its original form. Instead of the initial 7 cupolas, he constructed a single large cupola. This beautiful church remains preserved in that state to this day. In 1971, under the blessings of Catholicos Patriarch of all Georgia, Ephraim II and Metropolitan Iya, now Catholicos Patriarch of Georgia, who was then heading the seminary, Father Gabriel was appointed as a priest at the Santavro Convent and Seminary. He was granted ownership of an old tower of King Miriam as his permanent residence. Father Gabriel would occasionally express his genuine joy, saying, "Through the mercy of our Savior and Our Lady, and with the blessings of 2 patriarchs, I have been bestowed with this cell." From 1972 to 1990, Father Gabriel embarked on a remarkable pilgrimage, visiting churches and monasteries that had been destroyed or abandoned due to the pressures of the communist regime. Whether the journey was lengthy, remote, physically challenging, or posed potential dangers, Father Gabriel would often undertake these pilgrimages alone. However, on some occasions, he was accompanied by a group of believers who assisted him in various ways. Father Gabriel's perspective and direction and dedication were summed up in his words, "Always believe that our labor is in vain. Always believe that our labor is not in vain. Though many churches and monasteries are destroyed today or closed, the holy angel sent by God sees and listens to our diligence and supplication and brings our prayers to God with joy and makes him aware of it. We often find it difficult to do all these things now. We go in snow and slush, covered with plastic foil. We have to deliver sermons, but time will come and these churches and monasteries will be rebuilt and services will be restored. At that time, this vision of restoration seemed nearly impossible to achieve. Father Gabriel's solitary pilgrimages and his determination to preserve the memory of those sacred places stood as a testament to his unyielding faith, unwavering commitment, and enduring hope for a future where these cherished sites would once again flourish and thrive. In 1987, Father Gabriel chose a small shed as his dwelling place in a corner known as Kaklovani, a small alley of walnut trees within the Samtavro monastery yard. This modest shed had previously served as a henhouse in the monastery. Over time, it had fallen into disuse. Father Gabriel seldom ventured outside the monastery, only leaving for short periods of 3 days to a week before returning to his humble abode. This way of life embodied both his deep humility and asceticism. To subject oneself to such extreme conditions, living in a confined space where one can barely stand upright, and enduring winter cold without heating, especially when the walls have gaps of 2 to 3 centimeters, exemplifies true monastic asceticism. Monk Gabriel primarily resided within this small shed, only occasionally staying in his cell within the old tower. On one occasion, a holy angel appeared before him and revealed the location of a portion of the living pillar, a sacred relic. The angel precisely indicated where the relic was hidden. In reverence, Monk Gabriel and the nuns retrieved this holy relic and placed it in the Samtavro Transfiguration Church, where it remains preserved to this day. In 1990, Monk Gabriel journeyed to Shiomigivmi monastery with the intention of living a solitary hermit's life. However, during his time there, he received the divine revelation to return to Samtavro convent and continue serving the people. From that point onwards until his passing, Monk Gabriel resided in the old tower. He opened his doors to pilgrims as a confessor and dedicatedly served his neighbors with selfless devotion to his duties. During the tense political period of October to November of 1991 in Georgia, Monk Gabriel uniquely sensed the impending danger of future hardships. He would often proclaim, "Blood on Rustaveli Avenue! Blood! Blood of Georgians!" When gunfire erupted on Rustaveli Avenue, the Georgians fired upon their fellow countrymen. Georgians fired upon their fellow countrymen. Monk Gabriel rang the bells at Samtavro and lamented deeply. He intensified his fasting and even refrained from consuming food altogether. It is challenging to describe the depth of his mourning, tears, and heartfelt entreaties to God and Our Lady to save Georgia from the impending crisis. Monk Gabriel made no distinctions among people. He shared in the joys and sorrows of all who sought his presence. How many of them were saved from falling into the abyss of spiritual darkness? With his gift of prophecy, he set them on the path of truth. Monk Gabriel largely concealed his power of miracle working, revealing it only in exceptional circumstances. For instance, when fundamental Christian doctrine, such as the doctrine of the one essence Trinity, was challenged, he invoked his God-given ability of miracle working to affirm the divine truth. On one occasion, he received a visit from a Georgian who was a follower of Hinduism and had spent an extended period in India under the guidance of a spiritual teacher. Father Gabriel took a piece of bread, crossed it in the name of the Holy Trinity, and the bread astonishingly transformed into flame, water, and wheat. Observe this and comprehend. Just as it is with the Holy Trinity in its 3 hypostases, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, he explained. Father Gabriel then made the sign of the cross once more, and the water, wheat, and fire reconstituted into bread. Just as this bread remains whole and cannot be divided, so too is the Holy Trinity, one essence and indivisible. Once the egumen of the Zyropotamos monastery from Mount Athos, Archimandrite Joseph, along with other monks, visited Georgia. They came to Samtavro and received blessings from Father Gabriel. However, the elder took the opportunity to reprimand Father Joseph. How could you dare to boldly proclaim that the Virgin has abandoned Georgia? We are under the protection of the Holy Virgin through our prayers and her mercy, even if you fail to recognize it and disapprove. Upon hearing these words, Father Joseph was struck with horror and immediately sought forgiveness. Father Gabriel, displaying his characteristic love and compassion, embraced the Greek guest warmly and invited him to join them at the table. It was later revealed that prior to visiting Samtavro, the Greek fathers had also been to Svetsitskoveli Cathedral. The tense political and economic circumstances in Georgia, coupled with the spiritual challenges faced by a nation newly liberated from an atheist regime, had led the respected Archimandrite Joseph to express his regret for Georgia and silently contemplate, Virgin Mary, you have abandoned Georgia. On bidding farewell, excited fathers suggested Monk Gabriel to move to Mount Athos, but he refused and answered, my Athos is here. I would not trade my beloved Georgia for Athos. Around the same time, another significant visit came from priest monk Gerasim, who had traveled all the way from the USA to Georgia for the specific purpose of meeting Monk Gabriel. Father Gerasim had been serving in the monastery founded in Platina, California, by the renowned American hieromonk Seraphim Rose. Following his return to the United States, Father Gerasim and the Brotherhood of Platina, California, dedicated an article to Father Gabriel in the American Orthodox journal, The Orthodox Word. In the later years of his life, Father Gabriel fell seriously ill with edema. Additionally, he suffered a leg injury which left him bedridden for the last year and a half of his life, rendering him unable to walk. On rare occasions, enduring excruciating pain, he would request assistance to sit outside his cell. He would often say, your life is my life. If you don't sacrifice yourself for people, nothing will be accomplished. Despite his condition, his spirit of hospitality remained undiminished. Before his leg injury, he personally prepared meals for all who came to him. Even when cooking became impossible, he would request Mother Paraskeva or someone else to prepare meals, and he would offer them with immense love to his visitors. His unwavering effort was to guide everyone closer to God. His words, filled with divine grace and power, had a profound impact on every heart they touched. His prayers were accompanied by copious tears, leaving no one untouched by his profound devotion. Over the years, Father Gabriel primarily focused on teachings about God and the love for one's neighbor, emphasizing the significance of repentance, humility, and kindness. However, in the final year of his life, he underwent a sudden shift in his preaching, directing his teachings towards the topic of the end times. He earnestly shared prophecies about future events, warning his listeners, you will witness the rise of the Antichrist and you will face persecution. In those times you should seek refuge in the mountains. Do not fear. Just as the Israelites lacked nothing during their journey through the desert, having escaped the bondage of Pharaoh and Egypt, similarly God will care for those who seek freedom in Christ by fleeing to the mountains. You must understand that this path will guide you to the promised land, the paradise, and will illuminate you like the sun. In his final days, Monk Gabriel's teachings were centered solely on love. With tears in his eyes, he imparted his wisdom to all who visited him, emphasizing, always remember, God is love. Perform acts of kindness to the best of your ability, as through such acts you shall save yourself. Embrace modesty, for God showers his mercy upon his humble servants. Repent for your sins and do not delay for tomorrow, as this delay is a snare set by the devil. Love one another, for a person devoid of love cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. On the day preceding his passing, Monk Gabriel uttered these words, the time has come for my departure. Tenderly caressing the icon of our Savior that hung above him with his right hand, He fell into silence for a brief interval before continuing, I have followed you, Christ, since the age of 12. I am prepared. Take me. Throughout that night, enduring agonizing pains until 4 o'clock in the morning, he began to breathe heavily and called out, Mother, Mother, Sister, Sister. All who were present, members of the nunnery, his family, lay people, a doctor, and priests, gathered by his side. Father Gabriel fixed his gaze affectionately upon the icon of St. Nicholas of Myra. Archbishop Daniel led the prayers for the dying. As his final moments approached, Father Gabriel smiled and passed away in a state of serenity. It was November 2nd, 1995. In accordance with his last wishes, Monk Gabriel was laid to rest in the grounds of Sant'Avro convent, wrapped in a sackcloth as per an ancient monastic custom. A multitude of those who held him dear encircled his body during the burial. With a collective reluctance to release earth over him, the soil was scattered beside the grave. Remarkably, the earth seemed to move of its own accord, tenderly covering him, cradling him in its embrace until his body was fully covered with ground. In accordance with his instructions, the following words were inscribed upon his grave. Truth is in the immortality of the spirit. Monk Gabriel. Numerous miraculous healings are performed at the grave of Monk Gabriel. There are several books published in Georgia as well as in other countries about the teachings, life, and works of Archimandrite Gabriel. This is a photo at the grave of Monk Gabriel. May we have the prayers and intercessions and blessings of Most Holy Saint Gabriel.
Wow, that was amazing. What a story.
Yeah. There's so in that documentary that I shared with you as well, there's several stories from like more personal stories from people's lives who knew him, and it's really remarkable.
It is.
If it's all right, there's one I'd like to share. There's one more story I'd like to share that I thought was so moving.
Yeah, you want to do that now?
Yeah. One night there was a man who was in a bar, and it was like 2 a.m, and he was there getting drunk, very drunk, and Father Gabriel, Saint Gabriel, would, at that time he was in his Fool for Christ period of his life, and he came into the bar and started singing an old traditional Georgian drinking song with everybody. And he grabbed a glass of wine and he was drinking and pretending to be that he was drunk. And he, while everyone was singing the song and distracted, he went over to this man who was telling the story and said, "Brother, burn what is in your pocket." And then he backed away and he continued singing and then just kind of made his way out of the bar. And that man said that he had a suicide note in his pocket.
Oh, wow.
And that he had gone to the bar to drink himself into oblivion so that he could go through with what he was about to do. And when St. Gabriel came and told him that, then he did what St. Gabriel said. He went and burned the note, and then he entered a monastery and became a monk and lived as a monk for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So yeah, there's many, many, many miraculous stories from his life. That's just one of my favorite ones. There's a book, an English book, Great Art Thou, O Lord. Yeah. This was written by one of his spiritual sons, and he went and just collected a lot of stories from the life of Saint Gabriel, and it's got a collection of his teachings as well. Like the last part of the book is just a collection of teachings that have been collected on various topics. But and then I'll look up that documentary so I can share a link in the chat.
Yeah. What a life. Just beautiful. Actually, I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, he's very special to me. He means a lot to me. I don't know if this will post. We'll see. Looks like it posted. Yeah, so that's a link to a documentary about his life. There is a warning because of that story I just told. There's a warning on the video. That's what the warning's about. it talks about that subject. I probably shouldn't have said the word. Forgive me. But anyway.
I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
Actually,
I kind of talk in a fast way that AI has a hard time understanding, thankfully. So I can't do like text to, like I can't do speech to text AI. Like it just totally butchers what I say.
You mean that could affect this video for saying that word?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. They might put a warning on it. We'll see. I don't know.
Oh, well.
Might have to edit it. Sorry. I won't say it again. But anyway, it is a very beautiful, well done documentary. The people who made it traveled to Georgia, interviewed people who knew him, and then they have illustrations of the stories from his life as well, which is really beautiful. It's a really moving documentary.
So when he saw the Georgians killing each other before it happened, and then it happened, was that during the fall of communism in Georgia? Or,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was in the 70s?
90s.
90s. 90s. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 1991, I think it was 92, or it was right around the same time as the fall of the Berlin Wall. It kind of happened all at the same time.
Yeah. I also thought it was really interesting that they labeled him as mentally ill and gave him a disability.
Yeah.
When you read that part, I was thinking about in the recent Not Estuary show that we did. I was talking about how Jordan Peterson mentioned, and this was really, really early on in his, before he, got really, really famous or whatever. He was just doing, you remember he used to just do his podcast from his house, sitting in his chair in that room.
Yeah.
And and he was talking about people who live on the fringes and how there's an advantage to being on the fringe. And and he was also wondering why anybody, he was already intuiting, without having heard this from Pajot, that the fringe was trying to become the center, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so he was just musing about the advantages to being on the fringe, like even in ways that aren't spiritually healthy, right?
Yeah.
But in those places, you don't fall under any kind of social norms, right? You can live outside of social norms. And this is, just getting to that part in the story of St. Gabriel. I was thinking about that again, because in a sense, like somebody said to me once, I was very disturbed because I had heard that there was a rumor in the community that I lived in of 500 people, very small community, that everybody thought I was weird. And it really hurt me. Like it really hurt me, because I was under the impression that everyone liked me and that I was accepted in the community, but then I heard the opposite was true. And the day that I heard the news, I was having someone over for dinner, someone I respected who was older than me. And I and in a, kind of a plea for help, I told them what I had learned that day and how disturbing it was for me. And they looked at me and said, "Perfect.
Yeah.
Now you can do whatever you want. Right? Now you can be who you are." And it was so freeing to me. It was I'll never forget that conversation for that reason, because it changed the way that I did things. And I wasn't like going around trying to be weird or anything. I just stayed true to who I was, and I didn't try to conform to, what other people thought I should, like, because here's the thing. When I found that out, I was like, well, then how do I act? Because I don't know what's normal. I feel perfectly normal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is normal then, right? And I was so confused.
Yeah.
So, and I was just relating all those things because when he got that diagnosis for mental illness, I mean, they thought that it was negating everything that he said. Right?
Yes.
But okay, now nobody has to listen to him because look, he's got this label, he's on a disability, he's just a crazy man, right?
He's just
And
crazy,
maybe
yeah.
for some people that meant something, but I would propose that for anybody watching, it would be very clear very quickly that this was not a crazy man. And that what he's talking about is true. Like what am I trying to say here? This is a really great example of what men mean for evil, God means for good.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Oh, there's Eugene.
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi, guys.
Good evening.
Nice to see you.
You. Did you hear the story?
Yes, I heard. Well, most of it. I'd say 70%.
Were you familiar with it at all?
No. Well, I was familiar with the context. I mean, the whole,
Yeah.
you know, the period of the, I became a believer in '93. So,
Wow.
Really?
Follow the Soviet Union. It just feels so kind of fresh. As Jeremy read the story, it's like had vivid pictures in my mind of what was happening.
You were there, Eugene?
I was in Russia, but Georgia was part of the Soviet Union.
Right.
So yes, and after the fall, the 1991 events, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was probably late August. All of the republics, there was 15 like socialist republics inside the Union. So they started falling off one by another after another, and Georgia was somewhere, and but I don't remember any of the excuse me, any of the events in Georgia. But I remember there were shootings, quite a bit, massacre.
Yeah. Wow. I remember watching news, stories of, I think it was the year after the fall of communism in Russia. And people were in such a bad way. I mean, at least the news we were getting. I don't know how true it was.
No, it was true.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because it just, everything had fallen apart, right? The whole infrastructure, social infrastructure. And I have like very, very blurry images in my mind of people sleeping on the streets and lining up for soup and
Well, I don't remember exactly, being that bad. But I'm sure in some places it was that bad.
Yeah, it looked like probably Moscow, like a big city or something.
We should share this image again.
Yeah.
We shared it at the beginning.
Oh, this is burning.
Yeah, burning the banner of Lenin. This is actually what drew me to think Gabriel and made me instantly feel a love for him, because I'm not a fan of communism or Lenin.
Oh, wow. Yes.
That's an actual icon. That's an actual icon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like I was just saying, he got this diagnosis as a mentally ill person. And they thought that the authorities were thinking now nobody will listen to him, right? Because he's just a wingnut. But it gave him all the freedom to do things like that. I mean, it was after that he got the diagnosis, but they already suspected it, because I think earlier in his life, they had questioned him about his demonic encounters as a child and things like that. So they were already trying to peg him into that, mentally ill space.
Well, and then banning him from having any job is basically like exile, right? Like you can't. He wasn't allowed to work. So.
So I missed that part. Did he live on that disability pension? Because it was just tiny, little bit that you could hardly live on.
Yeah,
as far as I remember.
He lived on the streets. He was one of those, like, he was the embodiment of the scripture, John chapter 3 verse 8. Let me pull it up real quick. It's like one of my favorite scriptures, and I should have it memorized, and I used to have it memorized, but I don't have it memorized. Please forgive me. But hold on, I'll pull it up, because it's like the perfect description of his life. And the pages are stuck together. We can do it. We can do it. Yeah. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. And he very much fit that description. He would walk between these two cities at night. It was like a 10-mile walk, and he would walk there at night, and he would pray the whole time, and he would any money that was given to him, he would use to buy food and drink, and he would give it to other people on the street. And he was, he was but yeah, he just lived very simply. He built that little house on his mom's, next to his mom's house. Well, he built a little church, and he would live in that church. He dug it wasn't mentioned in this version of his life, but he actually dug his own grave in that church, and he would sleep in there. He would sleep in the grave, in the ground. And yeah, he just kind of lived like a homeless person, and he would just go church to church and go into services, and right in the middle of service, he'd say all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was like, some people just loved him because they knew he was holy, and other people really did not like him at all because he was very disruptive.
Well, which allowed him to do what he did. I mean, nobody else would have the courage.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
To burn, it's even now,
like a shield, basically. It's like camouflage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon with people, like this whole Fool for Christ thing. It's fascinating to me because it gets equated in modernity with mental illness. And like Jeremy said, it's like a shield in a way, right? Like, it gives you license to go and do things that other people wouldn't do, and even avoid, in some cases, punishment for those things. Right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And it was his way of also like staying humble, right? And always remembering that he is refuse, like you said, or he would live in the trash, right? It was his way of like not taking credit for what was happening. It was just full devotion and full like surrender, a crucifixion of his own will.
But evidently, from the things that he said, he wasn't mentally ill. Not at all.
No, there's a website of his life. That's where I got this. And he also has, on that same website, and let me pull it up. Let me share it here real quick. It has it has a section of his teachings as well. And you can read, he did so it was under, reminiscences are stories about him. And then it has the edifications, and these are basically little sayings that people collected that he said. But then, and I think it was in there. Anyway, there is somewhere I saw it today. I just saw it. There was a part in here where he asked somebody what their favorite psalm was. And they said Psalm 50. And he was like, oh, that one part that talks about how God has revealed the hidden and secret things of his wisdom. What does that mean? And the person was like, Father Gabriel, I don't know. And he goes, oh, I'll tell you what it means. The hidden and secret things of thy wisdom. And he laid out this beautiful homily on just that one little line from Psalm 50. And you can see just like how spiritually advanced he was, and how spiritually aware he was. It was very, I can't find it right now, but I'll look for it in a minute. But it was really beautiful. Just that little story about him, giving that homily on Psalm 50, just kind of, off the cuff, right? It's pretty beautiful. But it was clear he wasn't mentally ill.
Yeah. Well, it was pretty common in the Soviet times to give this diagnosis, quote unquote, to people, that are not favored by the government. They would send them to this mental institution, and the general, like the common diagnosis was religious intoxication or existential intoxication.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the two.
Wow.
So yeah, I've read about it. I didn't know. I mean, growing up, I didn't know that was happening, but later I read that. So that's
really common. Say that again. Existential what?
Existential intoxication.
Intoxication.
How they formulated it. So yes, or religious.
So what are they intoxicated by? Like, what is the poison that they've imbibed in that view?
Well, from a materialistic point of view, there's nothing invisible. If you talk about something invisible, you must be out of your mind.
I see. Yeah, I see. Yeah. Interesting.
But I was going to say that's really interesting that he would, because of his being fool for Christ's sake, he was able to freely speak to people about faith in God so freely. But I also remember that by the end of the Soviet times, the spiritual hunger was so pronounced everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And it was slowly building up, over the 70 years of this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Being in Babylon, so to say. So because I remember even in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, people would simply seek out, yearn any spiritual input, just anything, because I mean you live your life and you understand from just observing everything that there must be something beyond this visible world, and yet everybody, your education tells you that there's nothing there, and then the government tells you there's nothing there, but you just can't believe this. So after the fall, I remember after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was like a influx of spiritual influences coming in, all kinds of things. Every imaginable religion, every imaginable form of spirituality just flooded in.
Wow.
And people were just thirsty, and they were consuming it and consuming it and consuming it. It was like, it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was, on the one hand, it was really a kind of a precarious situation, but on the other hand, the doors were opened for God to just very easily come in.
Right.
And it lasted for a very short time, not very
long. Then the materialism came slamming back in the door.
Sort of.
Maybe.
Or a different kind of idolatry, I should say.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice
Capitalism.
way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, what I thought of right away was if you cast out the demon and don't replace it with something, then 7 more come in, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did find the story I was looking for, so I will share my screen and tell you how I got to it. So this is a website dedicated to St. Gabriel, and it's called monkgabriel.ge, and you can search for it on a search engine and you'll pull it up. It's pretty easy to find. It's like the main one if you just search for St. Gabriel, the Fool for Christ. And so there's some photographs here from when he was alive. And this is just the main homepage of this website. And you can kind of get a little more of a flavor of what kind of person he was. And then down here, there's a story: Saint Gabriel's interpretation of the 50th Psalm and the parable of the Tin Virgin. This is long, so I can't share it, but it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Yeah, I would really highly recommend that to anyone who's interested. It's so beautiful.
Can you throw a link for that page into the chat?
No, I can't post it. Unfortunately, YouTube won't let me post. You can't post links to external sites in the comment section.
Can you post it in a private chat?
I'll try. Let's see.
And maybe I can post it in the thing.
Maybe.
Who knows?
We'll see if it works. It did go in private.
Yeah, it did. Copy.
Oh, Stephen said Hieromonk Gerasim is now Bishop Gerasim of Fort Worth, my confessor. Wow.
Wow.
Well, he traveled all the way to Georgia just to meet St. Gabriel. So, Stephen, if you don't know St. Gabriel, you were able to post it. Excellent. Yeah, Stephen, if you don't know St. Gabriel, you should really learn more about him. He obviously had a big influence on your confessor. Wrote a book about him.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I didn't know Bishop Gerasim was a monk under Father Seraphim Rose as well, or at least at the same monastery.
Yeah.
So we lost our friend.
We lost Eugene. Maybe he had to go. I'm just going to throw another link in here.
Yeah, somebody come talk to us.
Oh, there he is.
Join us. He's back. Oh, good.
Yes, I don't know what happened. I tried to open the link and then I just got lost.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a beautiful site. There's just a few things collected there that are beautiful, but definitely if you're interested, I would highly recommend this book. It's really well written, very, very good. It's a simple book. It's not thick. So if you're like me and illiterate, you can still read it. So very good.
Yeah, these Eastern European saints are really, they're kind of, what do you call that? They're finding a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Maybe because they're modern and I can also relate better to their stories. I don't know what it is, but I can't imagine having to live through that,
Well, we definitely have a lot more details about the more modern saints, because there's more people alive here that can collect their lives, and so we have a lot more detail about their lives, which is really nice as well. And something my priest mentioned is that, like, people ask him why he became an Orthodox priest, and he went to Gonzaga for his undergrad work, and so he was surrounded by Catholics, and he was kind of thinking about whether he should be Roman Catholic or Orthodox or something else. And he said one thing he did was read the lives of the early church fathers and the early saints, like St. Anthony the Great, St. Martin of Tours, some of the saints that we've shared. And then he compared them with the lives of modern saints from both Roman Catholicism and from Orthodoxy. And he said, the spirit that you read about and that deep asceticism and that deep longing and love for Christ, but mainly that deep asceticism and that, like, the crucifixion of your will and yourself. He said for him, it was much clearer to see that in modern Orthodox saints, and how that same spirit that was in the early church had been carried forward by the Orthodox saints, he said, but it was very difficult for him to find that in the lives of the modern Roman Catholic saints. And for him, that was like a major point that helped him convert fully to Orthodoxy, was when he started comparing the differences in those lives between modern saints and how they compared to the early saints. So That's worth. I just mentioned that it kind of in connection to what you're saying, and how even these modern saints are keeping like that asceticism, and the fool for Christ, and wandering around in the city, and being an outcast, and being practically stoned to death by his own city. Very much reads like the old church fathers, and being willing to just stand at the feet of Christ and accept whatever comes.
Yeah.
Definitely. What's interesting to me, Jeremy, when you were reading, especially the last part, when he's dying, in 95. For some reason, I started thinking about what was I doing in 95, and it's just like it was an interesting kind of an inner dialogue happened in my mind that. I was a student, I just graduated, I could have been doing this, I could have been doing that. And all the while, there was this man somewhere in Georgia, doing his fasting, doing his vigil, doing his prayers, and being the salt of the earth. I didn't know anything about that. It's always so fascinating that, we only know just a little bit of history, through history books or whatever we hear from other people, or I don't know, but there's such a layer upon layer upon layer of history that's happening without our knowledge,
right,
at all. And maybe it's that unseen history that's really making the history, and not what we see on the news, but not what it's just somebody quietly sitting in a cell, or I don't know.
Yes. Well, like I was just thinking too about how Matthias Desmet talks about true speech, truthful speech. And I think that that this thing that Desmet's talking about, and I personally have good reason to believe that he's talking about people like this, right? Because he talks about true speech, but in love, not like just free speech where you can just say whatever you want, but you speak from a place of integrity within you for the sake of others, right? Like, and he says, and quietly, right? And this breaks the hypnosis of what he calls mass formation that happens in totalitarian systems of government and, even social movements, right? And, when I was listening to the story, I kept thinking, this is exactly what a lot of the martyrs and the saints were. They were these resonant voices that just kept bringing people back to reality, right? And the way that Desmet talks about it, because he's a psychologist, is that he says it literally breaks, it literally stops the formation, the mass formation from from hardening into to a solid mass. So it keeps that resonance, the vibration of the voice, of the truthful voice, stops the people from forming that a solid mass. And then he has these examples of during World War II, during the Stalin's regime and stuff, when those resonant voices went underground, as soon as they went underground for whatever reasons, persecution, or they were eliminated, that's when the worst atrocities would take place, because there was no more thing to break the spell, literally break the spell, right? Yeah. Eugene is clicking on. Did you click on the link?
I'm back. I'm gonna go inside because maybe my connection is not stable or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a priest who does a show. He used to do it every week. I think they do it every couple of weeks now. There's a channel called The Royal Path, and it's a priest talking with two. Like, one is fairly new in the faith, and the other one's been Orthodox for a while. But the first year of the show, all they did was went through phrase by phrase of the Nicene Creed and talked about what it means. And it took them a year to get through the Nicene Creed, so it's really in depth, really interesting. But now they kind of talk about current events, and one thing that he mentioned in there, the reason I brought it up, is that he says a lot of the political stuff now and cultural stuff it's to spike an outrage in you or spark an outrage. And he said the outrage you feel is the spell.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the spell, right? It's that that visceral emotional response you have to something. That is the magic being cast.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you heard it or not, Eugene, but when I was talking about that mass formation, what Desmond says is that as soon as those dissonant voices are gone, anybody who resists, or says, wait, if, the government's able to eliminate them or they go underground for safety reasons, that's when the worst atrocities took place in those systems. Yes. Yeah. As soon as those voices were gone. Yeah, if you want to read
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, if you want to read a really good book, The Psychology of Totalitarianism by Matthias Desmond.
Matthias Desmond, yeah, I have to remember this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just reminded me of this dialogue between Abraham and God, how they were bargaining about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
Like, will you destroy the city when there's 50 righteous men? No. How about 40? No. How about 30? No. How about 10? No. And then finally he sends the angels to take the last one out.
Yeah.
And then the city is kind of meets its doom. So it's like really there's a salt of the earth but I mean, you don't really see salt. It's kind of so interesting. When I bake bread, I put the salt, but then I mix it up and I don't see it, but I can taste it. It's there,
Yeah, and it makes
the bread is like the leaven, right?
Yeah.
It makes the bread. Yeah. When I was staying in the Toscana one time in Italy, and they have this special bread that they make there, but they don't put salt in it.
Oh.
And it's like, right? Like, you don't even want to eat it. They're like, what is this? Yeah. Yeah. I know I had a conversation one time with my daughter's primary school teacher because she was a really talented artist, this teacher. She was an older woman. And the kids would come into the classroom in the morning and all the chalkboards, there was like 3 walls filled with chalkboards. And she would not paint, but with chalk, she would draw these amazing illustrations from the story that they were reading. And that story would be part of their lesson plan for everything, right? So they would be immersed in this story but then here's the thing. She was going through a storybook called The Little Witch. It's a very famous story. But my daughter was having nightmares about this witch. and I think this is grade 1. And I asked I made an appointment. I went to see her and I said, could you tell me why you're telling this story? Like, I knew there must be a good reason. Like, I wasn't criticizing it. I wanted to really understand what she was doing. Right. And she immediately asked me if I was a Christian. And I said, yeah. Oh yeah, I am a Christian. Well, then why don't you send her to a Christian school? And I said, well, because
I will now.
No. You know what I said? I said, I don't know. I said, the Bible says, or the New Testament says that, we shouldn't heap salt up in one place, right? That it should be distributed evenly.
Oh, nice.
And so I think she should be here. But the surprising thing to me was that she actually assumed, because of my question, that I was a Christian and I was criticizing her. When I actually went there to understand the mythology of the story she was telling, and I was trying to figure out, because I wanted to be able to help my daughter get through the trauma of her nightmares. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But we reached an impasse as soon as she found out that I was a Christian. And she made, because she just assumed it, you know. It was so interesting. It really blindsided me. And she didn't know what to do with my assertion that salt shouldn't be piled up in one place.
Yeah. That's interesting. You know, it reminded me of a story from Constantinople as well, when Mehmet took Constantinople when it fell and became Istanbul. Shortly after he took it, and it took like 2 years, and they basically had it under siege for 2 years, and then finally he was able to take it. And but as soon as he came into the city and they started moving in, he started being tormented by dreams, and by a dream. And every time he fell asleep, he would have the same dream, and it was a hand holding up all 5 fingers, and that was just his dream. He just kept having this dream.
I'm sorry, was this
Mehmet, the Muslim general who conquered Constantinople?
Okay.
Mehmet. He was having this dream, and he couldn't get out, and he couldn't find rest, and he kept asking his advisors. No one knew what it meant. No one could interpret it for him. And finally they said, we found a monk in a monastery who's still here. Maybe he can. And so they bring him forth. Can you interpret this dream? He says, I need 3 days to fast and pray about it. And
it sounds like Daniel.
And so, yeah, he fasted and prayed, and he came back to Mehmet, and he said, the hand you see and the 5 fingers you see on that hand are the 5 Orthodox Christians that would have kept you from capturing this city had they lived here. But there were no faithful Orthodox Christians left in Constantinople, which is why Mehmet was able to come in and take it. But he said, these are the 5 faithful Orthodox Christians that would have prevented you from taking the city had they still lived here, but they don't. And so basically the whole city had become corrupt, and everyone wasn't. It's the same thing that happened in Russia right before the communist revolution, where the whole country, the whole religion, everything had fallen corrupt. And that's why God had allowed them to be, overthrown. But Mehmet actually really revered this man, and that man became the first ecumenical patriarch and was appointed by Mehmet, because Mehmet said, well, now I'm the emperor of Rome, because I took New Rome, so I can now appoint the ecumenical patriarch. So he appointed him as the ecumenical patriarch.
I see. Yeah, well, this whole conversation makes me a little more poised with this kind of current situation with the elections and the kind of a heated
rhetoric
and opposing sides, etc. As if sometimes I'm tempted to think that these people are the ones who make the history, and it's not really true. I mean, it's not on what we see on the screen that's making the history.
No,
it's totally different.
Well, like, I think your intuition about someone like Father Gabriel, like, who knows what was avoided because of his presence in Georgia, and what he held up because he was there, just like Jeremy's story about the 5 that weren't there, right? And I'm reminded of the story of I'm trying to remember, was it Aaron holding up Moses's arms? Or was somebody holding up Aaron's?
I think somebody was helping him.
It was Aaron holding up Moses' arms, because he was holding up the brazen serpent. Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm thinking is, these men like Father Gabriel, are praying for their countries, for the world. That's what these monastics do. And we should be praying for them. Right? Yeah. Holding up their arms, right? So that they can continue on in that kind of prayerful intensity, I think.
That's
yeah.
a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're out there. They're doing it all the time,
right.
you know?
Well, and something that keeps coming back to me, Eugene, as well, to speak to kind of what you were hinting at, like this whole idea that if you look at other people as the problem, you're the problem. Right? These people are acting out powers and principalities. We all are. We're all under this pressure and this duress, and to a certain, to a greater or lesser degree, we're all still under that influence. Even if we've chosen to follow Christ, we still have to wrestle with these things. But the whole point is that we're not, like, other people are not the enemy. That's the whole point. Like, that's the whole message of Christianity, is that we're called to love our enemy and to feel love and compassion for them, to see them as victims of these powers and principalities. They don't know what's happening to them. They don't know that they've been brainwashed or hypnotized. They don't know that that they're under these influences of very old powers, and so to me, that's what I've really been trying to think about a lot lately, is like to move my focus up and not see the people as the problem or the threat. It's like, no, don't threaten, like Christ says, don't worry about the people who can hurt your body. Worry about the people who can destroy your soul. And not the people, but I mean, worry about the powers that can destroy your soul. And I think that's what I've been really trying to think about in these seasons of tension.
And he also said, I have not come to condemn the world. Right. But that the world how does he say, through me might be saved, or through him might be saved. And that's exactly what Father Gabriel was doing. He was, through him, his world was being saved, right? Whether it was by breaking the spell, the prayers, God only knows what he made happen or not happen by his presence there.
Well, even burning that banner, that's
how many people did
breaking
that?
the spell for everybody there.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So, yeah.
I mean, it just blows my mind, because in those days it was such a courageous act. I mean, even now, after all these years, just the whole the idea of burning, the image of Lenin is like, it sent shivers down my spine. But he was able to do it. Anyway, it was cool. It was great.
Yeah.
When I read about all those saints of old, like Saint Patrick, who went to those shrine, holy places of the Druids and smashed their idols. It reads like it was something a long time ago, and it doesn't really feel real. But for me, it's like, go to the Red Square and blow up the mausoleum, the place where Lenin is. It's like what? Totally crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, anyway.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah.
One of the little. Oh, I was going to. Sorry. Go ahead, Sherry. Go ahead.
No, I just said that puts it into perspective, right? What it must have been like when St. Patrick.
What it must have been like, because in those days, I mean, we don't really understand what those stone statues meant for people.
No.
Well, I mean, I understand like what Lenin means to a lot of people, that visit the Red Square every day. It's just part of their lives. Even if they don't pay homage, but still.
Right. Like this what you're saying now is reminding me. I just watched Paul Kingsnorth gave a Erasmus lecture. It just came on YouTube today. And he starts it out with, when he was in the States last year, he went to the historical site, the Battle of Little Bighorn. Is that what it was?
Yep,
Is that what it's called?
Yep.
And he talked about, the loss that the Indigenous people suffered there. their land and the loss of lives and their dignity. But he also really put an emphasis on the metaphysical loss that happened to them, right? Their whole world was lost, spiritually and physically, right? They got moved onto reservations. Their numbers had dwindled, like, you know, and that's what happens when you smash the idols. I mean, I'm not saying that's what Little Bighorn was about, but the example that you gave about the Druids or blowing up Lenin's mausoleum, there's a metaphysical aspect to that. There's a metaphysical loss for people, right? When those things happen. Like they become fully ungrounded in a way.
Yes.
Well, we heard about that in the life of St. Gabriel, where he would tell people, you have that icon in your house. Either take care of it or give it to me. And there was another story in I think it's in that documentary where he would go through the trash pile where people would throw out icons like into the dump, and even like in the newspaper where they would print a little story and there was a picture of an icon, or they would use them in advertisements and stuff to try to make them not special. He would go through the dump and he would find those newspapers and he would find the old icons and he would take them back to his house. He would clean them. And if it was like from a newspaper, he would cut it out and he would like mount it on wood and like glue shells around it or something beautiful around it and like varnish it and hang it in his house. And that's what they were saying, like the walls, the ceiling, everything is covered with these icons that he had recovered from,
or people
throwing them up or throwing them out, or dumps, or people giving to him or whatever. He was like the museum of icons. It was like,
my husband's father was working in Eastern Europe. I don't know if he ever went to Russia. He might have, but he went to the Czech Republic a lot and Romania, and I don't know where else exactly, but he worked for a Swiss company. And he was a sales rep for that company, and his territory was Eastern Europe. And he used to go thrifting when he was over there, and he would buy icons. Now, I could never figure out why. It was really interesting to me because he was a very antagonistic atheist. Although his mother was a believer, she was a Methodist. Very pious woman, actually. And he had all these, his house was full of icons from that he would pick up in these, in the 50s in these Eastern European countries, because they were worthless at that time, right? Yeah. Yeah. He has many, many in his house. Yeah.
You start asking him for some.
I have one. Do you want to see it?
Oh, there you go. Yes, of course. Definitely. So how long are you in the United States now, Eugene?
Yes.
How long have you been in the United States?
Since 2016. So 8 years.
Oh, wow. Not long.
Not long at all.
No. Have you been ruined yet?
Ruined? No, I don't think so. No.
Good. Glory to God. Good.
Well,
good.
Yes.
Don't sell out.
Good.
Don't let the beast have your innards.
So this is one. Can you see it?
Oh, this is an old one, a very old one.
Yeah, that's very old.
It's very old. It's a very old one, and it's Elijah. And I found out. There's the back of it. It's an old piece of wood.
Wow.
And it is a favored icon of the old believers. Because Elijah had to escape Jezebel and run into the wilderness, right?
Yeah.
And so the old believers of Russia, it's a very, very common old believer icon. So I was kind of thrilled when I read that.
Interesting.
Have you seen that documentary about the lady who lived in Siberia her family were old believers and they fled. Have you seen that documentary?
Agafia.
Yeah.
Still living.
No,
she's still living.
Yeah.
Really?
And she's become an icon herself. Like she lives in an area now, which is, I think it's like a national park in Russia. And so the park rangers look after her.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think they built. Have you seen this documentary, Eugene?
No, I have not. No. What's it called?
I'll pull it up so I can share a link. I'll share it with Sherry so she can share a link.
I think you can actually post any link in the chat. You just can't.
Oh yeah, to YouTube I can. Yeah, if it's a link to YouTube, I can. You're right.
Well, even in the chat, I think you can post them, but they just won't post in the comments, like in the. So anyway, go ahead. Post away.
I will find it.
That's so super interesting. So her parents were old believers, Eugene, and I think sometime in the 60s, some surveyors were surveying out this area of Russia, way up north, and they saw dwellings of these people. And they landed, and they were old believers, and I don't know when they fled.
Well, there are many stories about like that. So I don't know if this documentary refers to one particular story, but if you go up north, I mean, they literally built their settlements from scratch with just a box of matches and an axe, and that's how they survived. And then they would, I know that they would do it several times. Like there's stories like, during the Soviet times, they would be exiled or they would flee to the taiga, and they would like basically build a little village from scratch.
Yeah.
But then KGB somehow found them, would be able to find them. And they look at how they live and they like it, and they say, okay, we're going to expropriate the whole thing. So they take it away, and they go, okay, what do? We just go to the next place, and they start the whole thing all over again. So there are several settlements around the place, and they just keep going away.
Yeah.
It's just
This is the one I saw. It was done by RT, and then there was another one. There were several stories. This woman has been, basically pestered now.
Yeah.
A little hermit, and she gets constantly like bothered now.
She's quite famous now.
Yeah,
actually.
And this was a Vice documentary.
I think that's the first one I watched was the Vice.
Yeah, here's the Vice one. I haven't seen the Vice one. I can't vouch for it, but the first one I saw. And what was really interesting is they said they started bringing her supplies when they found her in like the 70s. They started like going there once every 6 months or something. They would bring her flour, and they said, but they have to cut off the barcodes off of everything. If something has a barcode on it, she will not accept it because she said that's the mark of the beast.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Yeah, her mother died just before they were discovered. Her father died shortly after. They were starving to death, and it was just a family, and they lived just as a family. Like they never lived in community with other people.
Yeah.
And when her brothers got to a certain age, their father sent them away. He didn't want anything to happen to. I think there were 2 girls, and one of them died.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And so the boys were sent away. Yeah. And then she ended up with her father for the longest time, and then he died, and then she was alone. She still lives alone.
And then there was another guy who was one of the first people who discovered her, who he took up residence. He stayed there. Yeah, and he was trying to court her, and she wasn't interested, but he ended up just staying there. And then once a week, he had like a shortwave radio. He would talk to his son, who lived in the city, once a week. So she would go over there so she could like get news or send a message to someone. But and she got to know the son as well. But yeah, then they kind of had like a weird, like love-hate relationship going on where
Yeah.
they kind of depended on each other, but they didn't really like each other, but they did
Yeah.
because they at least weren't alone. You know, it was one of those. It's very, I don't.
It
was kind of familiar to me from being in a rural environment. That kind of happens where it's like you're dependent on somebody, but you don't really like them, but you kind of have to like them because you need them. You know, it's like one of those.
She was so used to being alone that it annoyed her that he was always around. If I remember correctly.
Yeah. But she would go and catch fish and like leave a fish for him in his house and stuff, like in his mailbox and stuff. So.
And she lived by the liturgical calendar. I think she prayed the hours.
Yeah, she recited the psalm. She had all the psalms memorized. She had the Psalter memorized.
Yeah.
Yeah, she would pray the whole Psalter every day. Yeah. So
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like you said, Eugene, there's a whole world that we're just not aware of,
not
or
aware
don't have access to. Yeah. You know, you asked the question, what were you doing in 95? In 95, I was a Mormon. I was just starting my Mormon missionary. Like in November of 1995, when Father Gabriel passed, I was 2 months out as a missionary in Toronto, Canada. So that's like very different paths, right? It's wild to think about.
Yeah, that would be so interesting when we get to heaven, is to actually sit down in this you know, I don't know what it's going to be, like a movie theater or something, and to actually see all those stories weaving together and what was actually happening behind the scenes. I mean, that would be immensely interesting to see the tapestry of the whole woven together at the end.
Won't
Because
that be?
you know, one thing that I was reminded of, we're talking a little earlier about I forgot what it was. Anyway, I thought about Christ and Pilate, how I mean, when I first read their interchange, I was kind of surprised because I mean, Christ literally kind of, Jesus kind of dismisses him. And I mean, he doesn't really revere this man who can literally, grant him life or take it away. And he actually says that because if God didn't want you to have power over me, you wouldn't have had any power over me. And so it's just like observing that poise and observing that, it's like Jesus is able to see what's going on in the invisible world to such a degree that he is not bothered by, whimsical behavior of certain individuals who, think too much of themselves at the moment.
Right.
And according to Armenian Orthodox Church, Pilate is actually canonized in that church, thanks to his wife, I think, because of or maybe later he had dreams as well, something like that. But Armenia is like a country next to Georgia, but the Caucasus region.
Yes, and I actually, now that you know it, that's just jogging my memory about, I don't know if it's Holy Grail stuff or anyways, in the British Isles, Pilate was also revered as a saint. And there was all kinds of mythology about him moving to the British Isles to live out the rest of the day. Yeah, where did I? Oh,
that's
interesting. I have to check into that.
Well, that's one thing I really like as well in Orthodoxy, how Thomas is not called Saint Thomas. I mean, he's not called Doubting Thomas. He's actually revered for being the one who didn't believe the apostles the other apostles, because they had all fled. And because of him, he was the one who put his hand in the side. He was the one who touched the wounds. He was the one who verified that Christ was physically resurrected. It wasn't just a ghost. It wasn't just an apparition. Because of Saint Thomas, we know that his resurrection was physical.
It was physical, right? Yeah.
It's actually, we revere him for that. We're grateful for that. Like he revealed that by just not taking the other apostles' word for it, especially because they'd been pretty unreliable up to that point.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go, guys. I'm falling asleep.
It's a pleasure to talk with you,
Had a long day.
So nice to have you again.
Yes. Good to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too. Bye, Eugene. Have a good night.
Bye.
Yeah. No, man, so many. This was a good one. I really, really enjoyed. That story.
I cannot talk enough about St. Gabriel. I'm huge. I love St. Gabriel.
And then having Eugene come in and talk about how impactful his life was as a Russian man who was there at the time. And, like, we can't really fathom how amazing it was to live the way St. Gabriel lived, during those times.
Yeah, we don't have the context fully.
We don't have the cultural context. So it's really nice to have Eugene in here to just kind of go, what? That's amazing.
Yeah. It reminded me of when I heard Father Stephen the Young talking with Jacob, and they were talking about the Gospel of John. And in the Gospel of John, there's that part where the Pharisees say, they're talking to Christ, and they said, when have we ever been slaves? Like, what are you talking about? And Jacob was just like, what? Like, what kind of Jew would ever say that? Right. And Father Stephen was like, yeah, it's because John is actually trying to reveal just how upside down and how corrupt and how far away they had fallen from their traditions, like how worldly they had become and how comfortable they had become and how separated they had become, and John is actually trying to show you that by showing a Jew who says, when have we ever been servants? It's like, when have we ever been slaves? Right. Yeah. It's just like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Jacob was just like astonished at that. And I wouldn't have, I didn't catch that because of the cultural context. And for him, it's just like the idea of a Jew not knowing of their slave background, is just
everything is about leaving Egypt.
Right. Yeah. Like their whole culture is around
the whole liturgical calendar is about leaving Egypt.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. It's a good point. And
and their whole existence is one lived within exile.
Right. Yeah. So
this is why I actually finally understood it. This is why Jacob is not a Zionist. Because for him, the Jew will always be in exile until the Messiah comes.
Right.
And so if the Messiah is not here, we're not supposed to live there.
Yeah, we shouldn't have a land. Yeah.
Right.
Should be in diaspora.
It took me a while to figure it out, but I figured it out.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to sign off too now. I think.
Me too. I had chicken curry for dinner, and the curry is making my eyes tired.
Yeah, probably the.
But it was amazing. We had an amazing dinner. It was really great.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. No, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me share the life of St. Gabriel. He's just a special saint to me, and I recommend everybody to check out the links in the chat. We linked some good stuff in there. The documentary about his life is unbelievable. There's a lot of personal experiences people had. And then also, if you really want to see how subtle and in-depth St. Gabriel's understanding was of the gospel, you can read that story about him talking about Psalm 50. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm going to read that too. Like he's just remarkable, actually, when you think about it. Growing up in a communist country with a mother who was trying to discourage his spiritual journey and being so young and being so devoted. That's really impressive to me.
With no father.
Yeah,
right?
No father, no.
His father died when he was 2.
Just a heavenly one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Very beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that, Jeremy. That was
Thank
wonderful.
you. No, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for let me be a part of this. It's a real joy. It brings me so much peace. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
All
right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you next Tuesday.
Thank you all. Good night. See you next week. God willing.